I think it's important because we're not beyond that. I think if you look at the last year alone, all of the civil rights issues that have occurred around policing, around the racial killing in Charleston, which was not police related. When you look at the disparity, blacks are still doubly employed to whites. The president talked about that the other night. So we're not out of it yet. We made a lot of progress, but we've got a long way to go. And civil rights is not a fashion that goes in and out of fashion. It's a need that has to be fulfilled, and until it's fulfilled, you will always have people like us do what we do. And if you read the criticisms of us, they are exactly the criticism they gave to people in the 60s. Outside agitators, troublemakers, divisive, same adjectives. And I think that you just must be more committed than those that are against you are committed to.
Good evening. I'm Eric Hackley, and this is Hackonomics. Tonight is not a live call-in show, but it is our Black History Month special edition here because we got some great stuff lined up here tonight. My first guest is a Black History Month civil rights icon here in Fort Wayne, Reverend Ike Fincher. Reverend, welcome to the show here.
God bless you.
I'm so glad you can make it because some of the things that Al Sharpton said, that was in a news conference when he was here a few months ago. And he, a lot of people anymore think that we're beyond the civil rights era and that stuff is old and we're just in a new day. Any comment on that observation?
We're still within the civil rights struggle. We will be in it many, many years from now. We have made quite a bit of progress, but we haven't made it yet. There is still things must be done. People must come together because the Bible say, together we stand, divided you fall. There's a lot of division yet. And many of us must do our homework. Homework is first. Charity begins at home and spread abroad.
Now, when Sharpton referred to that we're back in the time of the 60s, what the civil rights, the whole thing started pumping, I guess, in the early 50s, or I don't know before that, but I'm going to start with the 50s anyway for the sake of our conversation here. Because our president now, we're going back to the good old days, which they're referencing the 1950s. What was it like in the early 50s for black people? Because that's the time we keep talking about how great things were when America was great.
In the 50s, it was rather rough, especially in the South. Colored people many of us was called colored at that time during the 50s. Emmet was assassinated during that time. And here just recently, 2017, someone came up, the woman who accused him for misusing her, confessed that she had did a falsehood. She had lied about it. However, back in the 50s, it was a rough time. Rosa was working with the NAACP. She refused to get off the bus because she thought about the climate, the hostility, the separation during those years. So she refused to give a white man her seat on the bus.
But let me ask you this here. But now, in the early 50s in Alabama, where you grew up in Marion?
Marion, Alabama.
Was that a little bit nicer?
No, it was worse. There was 2 colleges in our town, in Marion, Alabama, the Military Academy and an all-girls college, the Jetson College. However, colored people is not allowed to walk across the lawn on either one of them. So that was not the good old days. That was the bad days.
At that time period, because, here we read about the Ku Klux Klan, was the Klan really prevalent around where you were living?
Oh yes, they were still burning crosses at that time. They were really in control some of our congressmen and leaders in that time, they confessed they had to be a Klansman to be in office. From Virginia, Congressman Boyd became a senator. He was a Klansman at that time.
Now, I should know this. I don't know what year Jeff Sessions came to Congress in Alabama, but I know that it was. Did you have any experiences with him during his tenure in Alabama? I know George Wallace was there, but
I had no. So I left Alabama during 1954. Came to Fort Wayne. When I left Alabama, if you was what we call now, back then they called it, you colored or Negro, you left, you went in the military. They draft you to the military. Well, I had heard so much about the Army, I didn't want to go. I volunteered for the Air Force rather than being drafted to the Army, but during that time. So.
But let me interrupt for a second. So you're saying that when you, during that time in Alabama, you couldn't just openly just drive away, just leave and come north?
No. They thought many of the tenant farmers, the landowners, thought they owned you. They punished the parents if you left on your own. So many of us had left there at that time. We had to get in the back seat of the car, lay down until we crossed the Mason-Dixon line, until you get out from that area.
Now I've got to ask
so
you.
You slipped away.
Now I've got to ask you this question about your older brother, Reverend James Fincher. Mm-hmm. How did he deal with that? Because I can't imagine somebody telling him that he have to lay down and hide. I mean, it's wonder if he didn't get killed.
Well, he left town when I was 12 years old. He left, went to Florida. Then, because he was stocky, large, somehow he left. I know he left. So we didn't grow up really together. Then from there, he came to Birmingham, worked at the Smith and Gassman Funeral Home. And from there, Fort Wayne, Indiana. But he never came back to live in Alabama.
So during that time period, is that what fueled your desire to get into the civil rights arena, or was it other events later on in life?
Well, in the South at that time, there was no industry. There was low income. I mean, like the average homeowner, they lived like $12,000 per year. That was the upper class, $12,000 per year. Well, you couldn't make a decent living there. So I decided to send money home back to Alabama to my dad. Then my daddy died in 1956. In other words, I was in the Kansas. We integrated the city of Kansas when the civil rights movement was really hot in the South, in Alabama. So we started in Salina, Kansas. I did.
How so? How?
Well, in the military. See, I went in the military.
Now, in the military, were you given the option to go to Hawaii when you joined, or go to some tropical place?
Well, once I did my training in Texas, San Antonio, Texas, I was supposed to go to teletype school in Wyoming. Instead, they sent some of the Caucasians there, sent me on-job training to Oklahoma. And from there, to Greenland, where it's isolated, near the North Pole. Russia just on the other side. They sent minorities to places where nobody else wanted to go.
To the North Pole?
Near the North Pole.
What was that like for you?
Isolated, no women, it was an isolated place. Russia on the one side of the pole, America on the other side.
Now, is this a snowy environment?
Ice and snow. 3 months daylight, 3 months night and day, 3 months total darkness, 3 months light and day again.
How long were you stationed there?
Well, it was a 12-month tour. However, people was losing their mind climbing the wall, so they cut it to 6 months there, come home for 30 days, and go back for 5 months.
So how did you deal with that yourself? How did you maintain your sanity?
Well, you read, you pray, and just maintain.
And no other civilizations?
Nothing around there but Eskimos, and you was not allowed to even talk with them. You were not allowed to go around them. You see a dog sled go from a distance, but it was just, you got, back in that time, old movies, because many times they had to fly things in for about 8 months out of a year. Fly things in, fly things out. So your food was more like ration, older stuff, you know.
All right, so in that environment, were you at least treated equally with the other soldiers?
There, yes, you were treated pretty much, but you didn't get the promotion. It seems like you was treated equally, but the promotion came far and far apart.
All right, so you left that area, and then where'd you go after you were shipped out of there?
California.
That was better.
Yep, California.
More liberal, more open, more activities for you to be involved with.
Yes. Yeah.
All right, so this is still the early 50s, and you came to Fort Wayne.
No, that was late 50s.
Late 50s. Mm-hmm. All right, so now how did you get tied into the actual movement? How did you meet Reverend Jesse Jackson and get involved with those guys?
Well, I met Jesse back in the early mid-60s when Dr. King appointed him at the University of Chicago, appointed him over Operation Breadbasket. That was the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. He started out with the Southern Christian Leadership Conference when they had recently appointed Dr. King over the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. But before then, there was Dr. Abernathy and Jose William, and that group was running the show. But when it got hot, after Rosa Parker came in, that's when they brought in Dr. King. And
now, I had a chance to interview Julian Bond one time when he was here in Fort Wayne. Mm-hmm. And he said that back in those days that Martin Luther King was not either well liked or he wasn't accepted by the pastors, where they just said, just sit down, just get out of here.
Well, during that time, Joseph Jackson, the late Reverend Joseph Jackson, was over all the ministers in America, the Baptist ministers. John Dixie was in Fort Wayne, was the moderator of the state of Indiana. But since then, everything broke down. The Reverend Jackson out of Chicago, not Jesse Jackson now, Joseph Jackson, the late Joseph Jackson, he did not like Dr. King because of his popularity. So he changed the whole letterheading. When Dr. King was assassinated in '68, he changed the whole, because they named the street after Dr. Martin Luther King, where his church was on. It was on the corner of Drexel and 31st Street. He changed the whole dynamics of the leadership of the letterheading to keep from recognizing Dr. Martin Luther King. So the ministers then started drifting, and many of them stuck with his ideology rather than Dr. King.
Now, you brought up Reverend John Dixie from Fort Wayne.
Yes.
This is the same time period.
During the same time period.
Because I've always wondered why he was so strong and what gave him the clout to do some of the things like pull the pastors together. I never knew that he had a national or had a state position like that.
John Dixie?
Yes.
The late Reverend John Dixie, he was the only one. Since back some years ago, they split. Well, anyway, the late Reverend Jesse White ran against John Dixie. He got the smaller churches together, and they voted him in, and that's put John Dixie out. Well, when John Dixie lost to the late John Dixie, Jesse White, then many of the other ministers started fighting against Jesse White. And then, in other words, that's the split started. And that's at a church in South Bend, Indiana. That was the biggest split they had. Reverend Samuel Walker and Reverend another Jackson out of Gary, and Jesse White, the late Jesse White, they went, one went to the east, one went to the west. And the split been going on ever since. So we're not together. Because the Bible said together you stand, divided you fall.
So how does that make you feel personally when in the beginning, what made this whole movement powerful was how they were together, fighting the foes that they were fighting against, and then it seems like as they were divided, then so did the rest of the black community too became divided.
Yes, but when after the work that Dr. Martin Luther King gave his life for, many people then fell in line with his movement. Now, with that movement, they misused Reverend Jesse Jackson's wife, Jackie, in the South. The ministers misused her, I guess because she was a lady. However, Reverend Jesse Jackson decided he was going to keep the same movement but rename it. So that's what came up with from Operation Breadbasket to PUSH, People's United Save Humanity. So I was chartered for Fort Wayne under Operation Breadbasket. I brought the charter here. But when he switched over from Breadbasket, Southern Christian Leadership Operation Breadbasket, went to PUSH, I was chartered then for Operation PUSH rather than Breadbasket.
Okay, I want to tell the director and the camera people that we're going to extend Reverend Fincher's segment here because he's saying some things that I didn't know about, and what he's saying is kind of important because a lot of those things tie into where we are today, and I'll bridge that gap here. So we're going to go just a little bit longer with Reverend Fincher here. So Fincher, Reverend Jackson was a couple years younger than you at the time. Well, it's even now.
He is 6 years.
What was it about him that you knew then, that you could see then, to know that he's going to be a very powerful man in this movement?
Well, when he came to Chicago, Chicago had Parker House minorities was the owner of Parker House Sausage, Joe Louis Milk Company, Grow Fresh Juices, and there was a bank, one bank, black-owned, operated. Dr. Martin Luther King, came to Chicago, asked Reverend Jackson he needed $10,000 to pay his staff, SCLC staff in the South. Reverend Jackson went to the business people, raised him $20,000. That's put him in the spotlight. He raised Reverend Martin Luther King $20,000 rather than 10. And from that point, the movement started, then they expanded in Chicago. And now Reverend King went along so much with Reverend Jackson on that. Then when King was assassinated, King lived in Chicago for a while on the west side. When the movement has expanded so, after Dr. King was assassinated, Jesse, now wait a minute, let me get this right now. Jesse decided, Abernathy came to Chicago, wanted to brag about his growth, and he was the father of the whole thing. Jesse told us, no, don't laugh at him, don't make fun of him, just go along with him. Just you know, I guess he used some of the biblical thing on that. Don't fight something that you don't need to fight against. Just be cool. So what happened was, he decided to give back to Southern Christian Leadership Company the Capitol Theater, which was on 79th, right off of 79th and Halsted. Give it back to them, because they own it. Give it back to them. We'll start, keep the same movement that Dr. King gave him, but just give it a new name. So I stayed up all night long to name it PUSH. People's United to Save Humanity. And then from there, it went from PUSH to
Rainbow Coalition.
Rainbow PUSH Coalition. Then other entity. Right now today, we're sitting, I was supposed to be in New York at the Hyatt Hotel right now, because the Wall Street Comfort there tonight, 3 nights, 15th, 16th, and 17th.
So you'd rather be here with me than be with Jesse Jackson tonight?
Tonight, yes.
I appreciate that, Reverend.
Yes.
But during this time period that we're talking about, when you look back at the old videos in the 1960s of not only the pastors, but the activists of that time period, everybody was strong.
Yes.
Everybody had real strong conviction. They made good sense. They may have had different arguments, but all their arguments were strong, and they stood strong behind them. What happened? I mean, today is a whole new ball game, because we're in the middle of Black History Month here in Fort Wayne, and you're not hearing anything from pastors. No activist spirit. No confronting Donald Trump. No confronting anything whatsoever. What happened?
New generation. Many of the new group haven't experienced where we came from and really don't know where we're trying to go. I said many. I didn't say all. Many. We got new ideas to the right, to the left, and for us and behind us. It's no togetherness anymore. It's the older group they was not educators, but they had, we used to call it mother wit. They would come together. Some could not read and write properly, but they would come together on a common cause. We got now, well, one want to go to the east, one going to go to the west, like Abraham and Lot. He, gave Lot the chance to go up on the mountain and choose where he wanted to go. So he decided to go to the green grass and the red lights. And sometime I think it is now with us. Some don't know which direction they want to go. And they don't want to listen to somebody who have been that route.
I mean, just like for a long time, professional baseball players, football players, basketball players, the black ones, they'd ask them questions about some of the forerunners in the sport, and they didn't know. But a lot of them, over the years, they began to learn more about the history of which, of what they are involved with. And that would be just too easy to do here with the pastors, because a lot of people, we've always heard that history repeats itself, and then we walk away from it. And right now we're in a time when history is indeed repeating itself, because when Reverend Sharpton said on the clip here a moment ago about how at that time period, when I was hosting political forums a couple years ago, we don't want no Al Sharpton's here. He's divisive. Everything that he said about what they said about the '60s was said about him. And this was on my show. I mean, it's my microphone, and I couldn't figure out why they would feel that Al Sharpton was like that. People on the internet today said, "You must like that Al Sharpton." No, they said that you were like Al Sharpton. That's a big insult. I said, thank you. I appreciate that. I complimented the guy on his observation, his accuracy. I mean, I'm not nearly as tough as Al Sharpton or anything like that, but my point is that the pastors that once upon a time, their influence was really strong across the nation, and influenced a lot of us coming along. The whole Black Power movement. I'd always been told that when you get an idea for a community or for betterment of anything, take it to the church or take it to a pastor and give it to him. And when I came out of college, I did that. And at that time, I had a group of pastors who weren't afraid to work with me. You, your brother, the Walker brothers, Jesse White, Kaiser, and a few others, and Reverend York definitely, and maybe one or two that I'm not mentioning. And then when they started dying off, I could put the whole group in the car right now and drive around and have a meeting in the car, because the idea of what I was talking about never could galvanize. But yet the issues were still there. People were talking about what we need to do, how we need to come together. But it's surely they can see this. I mean, what really is the problem here? I mean, we can say that they're divided, but it's beyond that.
Yeah, it's beyond that. Well, if you will look at one while, the landfill in New Haven, Indiana, was upset about the landfill over there with the growth. The city didn't want it to grow. They gave 193 acres of land to the Ministers' Alliance, which was controlled 99% of black ministers. Somebody sold the land. It was not to be sold. Somebody out of the minister sold the land. Nobody know where the money is. Nobody know what happened. Right now, nobody really even looking into it. So what I'm saying is, that was a division among us, some of us. So that's the older ministers died out. You can't ask them any questions.
So, but still today, we still have the issues. And when I call different churches, as a matter of fact, at that news conference featuring Al Sharpton,
I was there.
Some of the pastors around him, sitting right there, and I was behind my camera because I took that video myself. And I talked to the pastors after the conference was over with, and I said, at some point we should, talk about, these issues. And they said, Brother Hackley, all you gotta do is call the church. We'll set something up. I did, a couple of them. I sent emails to them, and nothing. I mean, I know for a while people thought that I wanted to be a pastor, and I never gave off that vibe that I wanted to be a pastor. But and then people said, well, you should join this church or join that church. I mean, they had a whole list of things that I hadn't done that I've got to conform to in order to get their support. But they don't ask those same requirements of people who they buy their cars from and people who they spend serious money with. And that's what I liked about you, your brother, and all your sisters, because they had that strong, that fire where they tend to understand the time periods. What was it unique about you all? I mean, your sister was the head of the NAACP for a long time. Your mother, we were in marches, and this is when your sisters had to be in their 60s, and we walked a long way, and your mother was there too.
Yes.
So what is it about you all that feel that is so necessary to be on the cutting edge like that?
Well, we all believed that, see, Coretta Scott King happened to be in our family that married Dr. King. And we saw the movement, we saw what they was going through, what was happening to them, and we knew the same thing would be happening to us. So every one of us, life members in NAACP. And we started going to the meetings where Andrew Young and where the core of the civil rights people, we was there. But many of the young generation, they don't feel that they need to go there. They want to lead without knowing where they're really going. You got to know. In other words, you got to know where you want to go to even try to get there.
You know, see, my main gripe, it's not really a gripe, but it's an observation. Each church in Fort Wayne is loaded with older people. I've been working on a project for the past 30 years, and where I was trying to document the stories of people from the South like yours, because the way the history is, unless those stories about how brutal things were in a plantation atmosphere,
It was brutal.
unless they're documented, they didn't happen.
Okay.
Because a lot of people don't mind rewriting history and changing truths with their alternative facts. You know,
Well, back in the South during that time, colored people were not even considered as a human being. Really, they were just another piece of property. Up until the civil rights came through, up in the '60s, you couldn't vote. You couldn't. You had no rights. You couldn't hold no office. If you was a policeman, you could not arrest a white man. No, it was barbaric back in that time.
well, this is a similar time because when the president appoints 2 Supreme Court justices, those voter rights act is, all that's going to be reversed. You know, but as we're closing down here and preparing for our next guest, I got to ask you this: am I wasting my time
No.
when I'm trying to talk with pastors? Because all that I really want is an avenue to get to the older people, to talk with them, because they're dying out every day. There's important stories there that need to be documented, and some say that it's best to forget, what happened then, because we're beyond that. But we're beyond that, but we're going back to that in full speed ahead. And I've been banging my head up against the wall, and some people have been telling me that, Brother Hackley, things are changing because God's going to see to it, and all you got to do is wait and be patient. When I started this, I was 28. Michael Patterson from Frost interviewed me, and I recently lost the page. We had a nice article in Frost when I was 28 years old, talking about what I hoped to do, and I stayed on track. But yet, a lot of the guys who aren't even from here profess to know the history of this land here, and it's just really aggravating. But I don't get disgusted with them. I try to meet with them. And each time I fall for the same trick, time and time again. Brother Hackley, I had one pastor. There was a political thing going on at his church, and I'll share this with you. Then we're get ready to close down here. And I said, why do you have these politicians here talking about how they're going to solve the issues in the black community when you pastors are preaching all these funerals yourself? You should know what those answers are. And he said, that makes sense. You ought to go talk to the Reverend over here. I said, I looked over, I said, where's Reverend? I looked back at the pastor. Bewitched has nothing on him. I turned my head for a split second. He's gone. And the pastor, so what is the key? A person that wants to work with the pastors, what do you do? How do you do it?
You're not wasting your time. The Bible says, seek, you shall find. Ask, you shall be given. Knock, the door will be open. Marching is still good. Women are marching now across this nation. Some marching for one thing, some marching for another thing. We're always teaching. You just can't sit still. You got to keep moving. If you keep moving in a certain direction, you're soon going to get to where you're going.
Okay, so it's been over 30 years, but I appreciate that. So, Reverend, thank you very much for your insights.
God bless you.
And when are you going to hook me up with Jesse Jackson?
Real soon. We're working on Rainbow Push now to revive it. We're working on it right now. It's about spring, you're going to see a difference.
I want to meet Jesse Jackson and do an interview with him.
You'll get a chance.
Thank you very much. Hold on. So get that clip ready to go, and we'll be back with our next guest.